In August 2023, Henderson, Nevada, stood as a quiet suburban refuge, miles away from the neon glow and chaotic crowds of the Las Vegas casino district. But on the morning of August 7th, around 8 a.m., that peace shattered. Looking out her window, a woman named Yoko spotted a familiar pickup truck parked outside. It belonged to her 46-year-old son, Jonathan Willette. Jonathan owned a logistics company and was a man of absolute discipline. He was supposed to be overseeing a massive commercial relocation project at that very moment. Staying home without notice was entirely unlike him. Sensing something was wrong, Yoko hurried downstairs. The atmosphere inside was instantly unsettling. Out in the backyard, the dogs were locked away, howling relentlessly. The garage door stood wide open, a chair lay overturned on the living room floor, and a faint light spilled from Jonathan's bedroom. Before we reveal what was waiting behind that door, a quick note. Every case featured here is drawn directly from official criminal investigations. The narrative is constructed strictly from documented, verified facts, with zero fictionalization. If you value this dedication to true crime, please support the channel by subscribing and engaging with the video. Your support is what drives the deep research required to bring these cases to light. Now, back to that fateful morning. Yoko stepped into the bedroom. On the bed lay a figure wrapped tightly in multiple layers of blankets, leaving only a pair of feet and a trembling hand exposed. Desperate to wake her son, she began tugging at the fabric. The moment the blankets shifted, horror struck. Panicked, she dialed 911. Following standard protocol, the emergency dispatcher urged her to check if the victim was breathing. Yoko's chilling response echoed through the line. He doesn't have a face. He doesn't have a neck. When police officers arrived, Sergeant Forrest Shields stepped into the bedroom and froze. The air hung heavy with the pungent, suffocating stench of ammonia and bleach. Strangely, the walls were immaculate, bearing absolutely no traces of blood. As officers cast their flashlights onto the bed, they witnessed a macabre sight. Jonathan's body was literally smoking. An active chemical reaction was underway. A highly corrosive substance was actively dissolving human tissue, causing the mattress to visibly deteriorate right before their eyes. During the initial sweep, investigators found no murder weapon. Jonathan's phone, keys, and wallet were completely missing. However, it was one grotesque detail that truly baffled detectives. The killer had taken the victim's head. An agonizing paradox emerged. How could someone execute such a brutal, calculated decapitation while another person slept peacefully upstairs, all while leaving virtually no biological evidence on the walls or floor? To decipher who would transform a suburban bedroom into a makeshift chemical laboratory, detectives had to dissect Jonathan's life. Willette was far from the stereotypical Vegas resident who gambled away nights at poker tables. Born in Tokyo to a military family, he was raised on strict discipline and fierce self-reliance. After relocating to Nevada, he spent over 20 years working on the bustling Las Vegas Strip, selling timeshare packages to tourists. It was a high-stakes profession that demanded relentless resilience, magnetic charisma, and an extraordinary ability to read and connect with absolutely anyone. After accumulating enough startup capital, Jonathan launched a recruiting agency dedicated to helping local residents find employment. Shortly before the pandemic, he pivoted again, establishing the logistics company, the very business that would later spark his mother's frantic concern when he uncharacteristically failed to show up for work. The enterprise expanded rapidly, eventually securing high-profile clients, including Hollywood actor Jamie Foxx. Jonathan was the ultimate workaholic, yet he remained a steadfast pillar of support and protection for his loved ones. But beneath the veneer of a thriving entrepreneur lay a personal life that had completely fractured. At the epicenter of this ongoing turmoil was 45-year-old Devon Michaels. Years earlier, she had worked in the adult entertainment industry under the stage names Nikki and Trace. Her marriage to Jonathan began in 2012, initiating what those close to them described as a non-stop, volatile roller coaster. Though the couple shared 2 daughters, the relationship collapsed under its own weight by 2018, culminating in a bitter, highly contentious divorce. From there, the dynamics grew exponentially more toxic. In October 2022, Devon was arrested following severe allegations of child mistreatment involving her daughters. Recognizing the danger, the family court intervened, stripping Devon of her parental rights and granting Jonathan sole legal custody of the girls. On paper, this was his golden opportunity to sever ties, change the locks, and finally close the chapter on a toxic marriage. Yet, this is where a tragic, hauntingly common pattern in true crime emerges. The victim of aggression often struggles to truly detach from the abuser. Driven by a desperate desire to preserve the illusion of a normal, intact family for his daughters, Jonathan constantly tried to play the peacemaker. He consistently minimized boundaries, bypassed court restrictions, and bent the rules to allow Devon access to the children. Believing he could micromanage the chaos and smooth things over, Jonathan's unwavering confidence in his ability to fix the broken dynamics created a fatal blind spot. Without realizing it, he invited the threat right back into his inner circle, entirely unaware that his ex-wife had secured a terrifying, highly unexpected ally. Months before the tragedy, the disturbing truth about this secret partnership finally exploded into the open. The ally was none other than Willette, Jonathan's 26-year-old son from a previous relationship. Standing an imposing 6'6" and weighing well over 180 pounds, Daver was a towering figure. He worked as a security systems technician, a profession that granted him advanced knowledge of electronics, surveillance, and heavy-duty industrial tools. For years, father and son had been inseparable. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, their bond fractured. The catalyst for their estrangement shattered every social norm imaginable. While financial greed routinely motivates the crimes we examine, investigators here uncovered a genuine, deeply disturbing family anomaly. Daver eventually dropped a bombshell confession on his father. He had secretly married Devon. In a staggering twist of betrayal, Jonathan's own son had legally wed his father's ex-wife. Despite an 18-year age gap, evidence later hinted that their illicit relationship may have sparked when Daver was just 19. In a single, bizarre legal stroke, Daver had become the stepfather to his own younger half-sisters. Daver desperately tried to downplay the betrayal, claiming the marriage was purely administrative for insurance purposes and insisting no physical relationship existed. Jonathan, understandably, was furious. He unleashed his disbelief and rage in a series of scathing text messages. While most people would have permanently cut ties and barred both from their lives, Jonathan made a decision that defied basic self-preservation. His obsession with keeping the family together for his daughters overrode all logic, setting the stage for an unimaginable horror. Jonathan then devised a plan that, even in hindsight, defies all logic. He wanted everyone living under the exact same roof. His grand design was to move his daughters, his son, and his ex-wife together into a house nestled in the quiet North Cheyenne area of northwest Las Vegas. Driven by this bizarre optimism, Jonathan personally orchestrated the entire move, renting the property and packing the boxes himself. Throughout those frantic days of preparation, Daver hung around the fringes, carefully avoiding eye contact with his father. Meanwhile, Jonathan genuinely believed he could mend the fractures and orchestrate a grand family reconciliation. By the evening of August 6th, mere hours before Jonathan's body would be discovered, preparations for the move were nearly complete. Jonathan and Devon arrived at Yoko's home to spend the night, settling into a first-floor bedroom. Later that evening, Devon offered to give her ex-husband a massage to help him unwind after a grueling day of heavy lifting. She also offered what seemed like a perfectly legitimate medical reason to avoid further intimacy, noting she had recently undergone a gynecological procedure. It was the perfect pretext. The explanation ensured Jonathan would lie face down, his back turned to her, lower his guard completely, and drift off to sleep. Fast forward to the morning of August 7th. While forensic specialists meticulously gathered evidence inside Yoko's chemical-soaked bedroom, investigators shifted their crosshairs to their prime suspect. Detectives immediately headed to Devon Michael's residence, located roughly 25 miles from the gruesome crime scene. The rationale was simple. Devon was the last person seen alive with Jonathan, and she had slipped out of the house under the cover of darkness late that night. When officers arrived at the address, they stumbled into their first major breakthrough right out in the open. Jonathan and Devon's daughters were playing in the driveway. The girls were actually the first to spot a cell phone lying on the pavement near their mother's 2017 Nissan Armada. They instantly recognized it as their father's. When officers retrieved the device, they immediately noticed a distinct, dark brown smear across the screen. A preliminary field test confirmed the obvious. It was blood. It is a paradox that frequently emerges in criminal investigations. Why would someone expend so much calculated effort to erase a crime scene, deploy powerful chemical agents, and go to extraordinary lengths to mask a homicide, only to leave a blood-stained phone sitting carelessly next to their own vehicle? Was it a fatal mistake born of sheer exhaustion after a sleepless, chaotic night? Or was it the arrogance of a killer who genuinely believed they were smarter than the police? I'd love to read your theories on this bizarre contradiction in the comments below. The discovery of the blood-smeared phone provided investigators with rock-solid probable cause to secure an emergency search warrant. The moment the ink dried, detectives crossed the threshold and began a meticulous, room-by-room sweep of Devon's house. Inside her bedroom, investigators focused on a dresser packed with personal items. Buried at the very bottom of a drawer, beneath stacks of underwear, detectives pulled out a plastic bag tied shut with a tight knot. Inside were Jonathan's keys, his wallet, and his social security card, the everyday essentials he never left behind. Simultaneously, another team of investigators was combing through an adjacent room. Tucked onto a shelf, they discovered a brand new photo album. They flipped it open to find recent wedding pictures. In the photographs, Devon posed radiantly in a white dress, standing beside a tall groom who was kissing her on the cheek. It was Daver. That groom was Daver. For investigators, this album served as concrete, documented proof of the clandestine marriage between the former stepmother and stepson. This revelation permanently altered the trajectory of the homicide investigation. With the victim's personal belongings intentionally concealed beneath her clothing and undeniable proof of this taboo alliance in hand, detectives realized this was no spontaneous argument that had spiraled out of control. Instead, they were untangling a calculated, coordinated family conspiracy. The challenge now was to determine the precise division of labor between the two suspects, establishing who wielded the weapon and reconstructing their movements in the critical hours surrounding the murder. On August 15th, just over a week after the gruesome discovery, detectives brought Devon into the Henderson Police Department for a formal interrogation. Initially, she exuded an eerie confidence, bordering on pure arrogance. When investigators bluntly asked how a fresh smear of Jonathan's blood ended up on his cell phone screen, she offered a mundane, pre-rehearsed explanation. Devon claimed that while packing boxes for the upcoming move, Jonathan had accidentally cut his hand and inadvertently transferred the blood to his device. However, detectives already held the medical examiner's preliminary report. The findings were indisputable. Jonathan's hands bore absolutely no cuts, scrapes, or abrasions. Her first alibi dissolved instantly. Realizing that denying the physical evidence was futile, Devon pivoted aggressively. She admitted she was in the bedroom that night, but weaponized a new narrative centered entirely on self-defense. She claimed that during the massage, Jonathan exhibited highly inappropriate, aggressive behavior. Fearing for her safety, she alleged she grabbed a heavy metal candlestick, struck him once in the head, and fled the room in a panic. Devon vehemently insisted that when she left, Jonathan was alive and breathing normally. It is fascinating how frequently suspects underestimate their digital footprint. They construct elaborate cover stories and rehearse meticulous scripts, yet completely forget about the silent electronic witnesses tracking their every move. First, investigators pulled cell phone tower records. The data revealed that Jonathan's phone and Devon's phone traveled through the city together, mirroring the exact same route until approximately 2:45 a.m. Next, forensic technicians extracted data from Devon's Nissan Armada. The vehicle's onboard multimedia system contained an electronic trip log that recorded the precise second the engine ignited. According to the computer, her SUV didn't leave Yoko's house until 2:04 a.m. This completely demolished Devon's timeline. She had remained at the bloody crime scene for hours, not minutes, after the assault. The final, most damning contradiction came from city surveillance footage. At approximately 2:30 a.m., a camera captured Devon at a 24-hour pharmacy drive-through window making a casual purchase. She appeared entirely unfazed, dressed in a bright white tank top and light blue shorts. As detectives stared at the crisp footage of the calm woman at the window, they noticed a glaring, crucial detail. There were no visible stains, no chemical residue, and absolutely nothing about her demeanor that suggested she had just fled the chaotic, bloody scene she later described to detectives. This presented a massive logical hurdle for the prosecution. It was physically impossible to assault someone, spend hours inside a bedroom saturated with corrosive chemicals, and then appear under bright drive-through cameras wearing pristine white clothing without a single trace of contamination. As the investigation pressed forward, the profile of the perpetrator increasingly shifted toward the second participant in the secret marriage. By November 2025, this convoluted case finally reached a Clark County courtroom, igniting a legal battle that forced everyone involved to re-examine the entire investigation. Originally, prosecutors offered Devon Michaels a plea agreement. The deal required her to plead guilty to second-degree murder charges in exchange for a fixed 15-year prison sentence. However, the defendant made what many legal observers considered a catastrophic tactical blunder. She rejected the deal and chose to take her chances before a jury, steadfastly maintaining her absolute innocence. The defense countered with an aggressive, scorched-earth strategy. Rather than offering a traditional defense for Devon, her attorneys redirected the crosshairs toward the one person who fit the profile of the actual perpetrator better than anyone else. They presented a mountain of facts that, according to the defense, investigators had largely overlooked during the early stages of the case. During the trial, jurors were shown years of private messages and photographs between Devon and Daver. The digital footprint revealed that their secret romance had quietly thrived for more than 7 years. Jonathan's sudden, idealistic plan to move everyone into a single household threatened to completely disrupt their lives. According to testimony, Jonathan fully intended to exclude Daver from the new living arrangement. From the defense's perspective, Daver possessed an undeniable, explosive motive: intense jealousy, the imminent loss of his comfortable lifestyle, and a desperate fear of being permanently separated from the woman he loved. At this juncture of the trial, the strategic weaponization of family ties was impossible to ignore. The defense was essentially turning two secret lovers against each other, sacrificing the husband to save the wife. Her attorneys also leaned heavily on the question of physical capability, asking jurors a straightforward question: could a woman of Devon's size realistically overpower a physically strong adult man, decapitate him, and manipulate a heavy crime scene completely unassisted? They reminded the jury that Daver worked with security systems and had extensive experience handling industrial construction equipment. He understood surveillance networks and knew exactly how to exploit blind spots. Furthermore, when investigators originally searched his residence, they discovered a vast collection of power tools. According to the defense, these items were never thoroughly swept for DNA, despite their obvious relevance. For a brief moment, it appeared the defense had successfully seeded reasonable doubt, giving the jury a tangible reason to hesitate. They had masterfully painted Devon as a terrified woman pressured into concealing a horrific crime committed by the victim's own son, but the prosecution wasn't about to back down. The definitive answer regarding who was truly pulling the strings came from an unexpected, devastating source: a recorded jailhouse phone call. Prosecutors played an audio file of a conversation between Devon and Daver captured while she was in custody. On the tape, Devon broke down in tears, reassuring her young husband that investigators had nothing substantial on her, just a bottle of cleaning solution. Daver's response was strikingly cold. Stripped of any concern, loyalty, or marital solidarity, he bluntly informed her that he was moving to California. and that their relationship was over. In an instant, he cut his wife loose to face the justice system entirely alone, simultaneously dismantling the defense's narrative of a devoted, codependent partnership. To eliminate any lingering uncertainty for the jury, prosecutors carefully reconstructed the exact events of August 6th. That evening, Jonathan lay down on the bed in the first-floor bedroom while Devon began the massage she had offered. According to toxicology findings presented in court, Jonathan had alcohol and tetrahydrocannabinol in his system. This combination deeply relaxed him, slowing his reflexes until he finally drifted into a heavy sleep. In that vulnerable state, his physical size and strength offered no advantage. Prosecutors argued that overwhelming physical force wasn't even necessary. Their reconstruction showed that a single, well-placed strike with a heavy object was enough to completely incapacitate him. The evidence suggested there was no meaningful struggle. Once convinced her ex-husband was dead, Devon allegedly initiated the next phase of her plan. According to the prosecution, a reciprocating saw was subsequently used to alter and conceal the remains. This specific timeline provided investigators with the answer to one of the case's most perplexing mysteries: how her clothing remained pristine. The medical examiner testified that the extensive alteration of the body occurred hours after death. Because Jonathan's blood circulation had already completely stopped, the dismemberment unfolded without the catastrophic spray many would expect. This forensic explanation accounted for why Devon's white tank top and light blue shorts bore no obvious signs of biological contamination. Having analyzed countless calculated homicides, one chilling detail stands out: the psychological capacity to execute a methodical, gruesome cleanup and then casually converse with the victim's mother minutes later is a level of composure that even seasoned investigators find deeply unsettling. Around 1:00 a.m., an encounter occurred that prosecutors later highlighted as definitive proof of that cold-blooded composure. Waking up thirsty, Yoko walked downstairs to the kitchen. When she flipped on the light, she found Devon calmly washing dishes. Yoko asked about her son. In a soft, steady voice, Devon reassured her that Jonathan had simply drank too much, was completely exhausted, and should be left to rest undisturbed. Showcasing zero panic or emotional strain, Devon played the part perfectly. Reassured, Yoko went back to bed, entirely unaware of the horror resting just beyond the neighboring door. Once alone again, Devon allegedly resumed sanitizing the room. Investigators testified that massive quantities of ammonia and bleach were poured over the bed in a desperate bid to obliterate DNA evidence. The chemicals violently reacted with one another, eating away at the mattress and generating the toxic, suffocating fumes that would later overwhelm responding officers. At 2:04 a.m., Devon finally walked out of the house, carrying Jonathan's keys, his wallet, and a plastic laundry basket. Inside that basket, prosecutors alleged, was the missing evidence. She loaded the cargo into her SUV and drove off into the night, leaving behind the howling dogs and a chemical-soaked tomb. Throughout the trial, the defense repeatedly insisted that Daver was the one who had handled Jonathan's personal belongings. However, detectives pivoted back to the plastic bags recovered from the bottom drawer of Devon's dresser, the very bags concealing Jonathan's keys and wallet. A forensic specialist took the stand, presenting laboratory findings that delivered a fatal blow to the defense. The defendant's genetic material was recovered directly from the tightly tied knots of those bags. When the defense attempted to dismiss this as accidental DNA transfer, the expert countered with a devastating statistical reality. The probability that anyone other than Devon had tied those knots was a staggering 1 in 90 octillion, a number followed by 27 zeros. Faced with such definitive science, room for debate vanished. On November 14, 2025, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. On January 8, 2026, the judge delivered the sentence. Condemning the calculated, cold-blooded nature of the assassination and refusing leniency, the court handed down a sentence of 28 years to life in prison. By rejecting the initial 15-year plea deal, Devon had gambled and lost everything. Today, She is serving her time at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Nevada. Daver, meanwhile, remained free. Investigators simply could not establish conclusive physical evidence tying him directly to the execution of the crime. Jonathan's daughters are now being raised by their grandparents, but one dark chapter of this tragedy remains forever unresolved. The businessman was laid to rest with a piece of him missing. Investigators used the Nissan's onboard trip log to track Devon's route that night, discovering her SUV had paused near ordinary trash dumpsters in her neighborhood. Despite extensive, grueling searches through landfills and waste routes, police never recovered Jonathan's head. To this day, that final, grim secret remains locked away with Devon in her prison cell.